Yo, what's good, relatives? This is Mike Bravo, Kimichi Billy, back again. Thanks again to everyone who tuned in for the last show. Appreciate you. This video, I want to talk about the recent snub by the new president of Mexico. She snubbed Prince Charles of Spain uh, by not inviting him to her inauguration, her presidential inauguration. Mainly for the reasons of him, I guess, disregarding the previous president, Obrador, his request for an apology regarding the oppression from Spain towards Mexico's indigenous people, right? So that's the topic I want to talk about today. And again, too, I don't plan on doing too much political analysis or political related topics. But I guess ultimately, as indigenous people on occupied land, just our very existence is political, right? So I guess even no matter how soft we try to present topics, cultural or whatever, no matter what, regardless, everything we do is highly political because again, we're indigenous people on occupied land. So, but as far as the more particular political analysis on this channel, I only really plan to do it when it concerns dynamics of indigenous identity and indigenous representation, as well as we build indigenous power, community power, and build our communities. It's important to kind of clarify these nuances and have a radar and just make sure we're not falling okey doke to a lot of, I say, the deceptive, possibly deceptive messaging or implications of a lot of these, political moves on the greater, larger political stage, right? Again, because I feel like there's a lot of is this topic has been real popular on social media recently, and I feel there's a lot of misframing. And over here, I definitely one of the goals of this page that we try to do, even on the website, is trying to get into the nuances of indigenous thought and application, right? Like kind of steering away from a lot of the bumper sticker approach and thinking, right? Which that's important to kind of get an idea through our head and kind of help solidify a message. But a lot of it's just there's not a lot of nuance or practicality being explained when it comes to a lot of these indigenous stances or political phrase, political mantras, if you will. And again, that's another one of the focuses of what I try to do here at Six Sun Riders. So again, the topic goes back to the president of Mexico snubbing the king of Spain. I think Felipe is his name, King Felipe, for not apologizing and for dissing and for dissing Obrador's previous request from him when he was president. Just obviously very recently. Um, I think this gives a false impression that Mexico is an indigenous state, and we want to acknowledge that, like, while Mexico's the bulk of Mexico's population is of indigenous people, right? There's, predominantly of Mesoamerican cultural heritage and stock, right? Regardless of people um, might not acknowledge that, right? And just another reminder, mestizo is not an identity, right? Um, and then also within Mexico, I'm indigenous, right? I'm indigenous AF. But if I go to Mexico, there's we have to understand the politics of labels and the way things are described and within the context of politics in Mexico, right? So like if I go to Mexico, right, like I'm probably just considered an average Mexican, citizen or whatever, right? Versus like there's communities over there in Mexico that are particularly identified, who identify as and are identified by more official government standards as okay being an indigenous community, right? Even though technically we're all indigenous to be a culture, again, going back to certain social and political classifications and dynamics, right? It's more particular. Sorry, my power tripped out on me over here. I had to restart. But as I was saying, a lot of the issue I have with this is that I feel it's like a mischaracterization of a mischaracterization with, I guess, deceptive implications or deceptive messaging, in the sense that Mexico, the state of Mexico, country of Mexico, is not a indigenous state, right? Even though, again, we're, it's dominated, predominant population of people of Mesoamerican descent, right? And even though the government obviously has like a lot more so-called mestizos, which, I guess, more accurately, just average Mexicans, I guess, if you will, right? Um, it's still a Criollo, of course, being Spanish, Iberian, European people born within Mexico, raised in Mexico, right? Who are considered Mexican by Mexican citizenship or what have you. Too. And that's why we got to be real careful. Like I mentioned in the last, I'm always going to clarify that. Just being really careful about how we're using the term Mexican, right? And kind of really clarifying and distinguishing the indigeneity from the, I guess, the white supremacy dynamics, right? The whiteness, or in this case, the white supremacy dynamics via like Latinidad, right? Which is European. But the point being that with the president's Claudia Sheinbaum, right, the new president, and even with Obrador, right, they're just a call for it. Like I feel gives the impression that of this Mexico versus Spain, right? So you think in the psyche of when you hear that, right, Mexico versus Spain, you think about the Aztec War. It evokes indigenous historical connotations, right? So by them, this again, Mexican government, Criollo dominated, or at least still heavily influenced. The model still draws from colonial structures and trajectory. So by them doing this, like this whole Mexico versus Spain, the connotations of that language, it evokes like an indigenous cry, right? Like a battle cry. So then it's to me it kind of comes off like it could be an attempt to, as like psychological rallying, like evoking sentiments or ideas of like Spain versus I'm sorry, Mexico versus Spain, right? Even though the Krill government is not really an indigenous based government per se, as far as the structure and its roots, and so that's basically the way I feel it's being deceptive. It's getting the implication, at least in the psyche, and getting people caught up in this like emotional kind of rallying, right? And it's a way to kind of seem like make the Mexican government seem like it's all good, and like we're all one again, right? We're all unified against Spain, Mexico's heritage against Spain or whatever. Put on that whole like collective psyche, right? Again, even though a lot of people in Mexico are not of indigenous background culturally or cultural continuity or of Mesoamerican trajectory, like I mentioned in the last video, it's still heavily influenced and draws from a Criollo framework. But I do want to acknowledge too. I don't want to be a complete hater. This is me just kind of trying to invoke a critical eye, critical radar, right? Because we're bombarded with media all the time, and people are quick to grab onto the emotional, right? And if you understand the basics of like marketing and manipulation, it's always they always try to trigger your emotion, right? And use words or symbols, whether the symbol is a word or a symbol is a actual visual symbol. They're always trying to draw in your emotion to pull away from the balance of thinking with using logic. And when people are evoking that emotion, I feel it just leaves more room for manipulation. So again, just to kind of nurture a critical radar, a critical eye when it comes to things like this. And I don't want to I don't want to diss or downplay the good work that or at least the significant, I guess, at least public intentions by Obrador, the former president, and the current president to, I wouldn't say they're centering indigenous or indigeneity now, but they're definitely seem to be trying to do right. Again, to me, it's all for me being an activist for a long time, one thing is that people talk a lot and people say a lot, but people rarely follow it up with actions or integrity. So again, I'm not in Mexico. I'm not fully versed on everything they're doing or not doing, but so it's important to acknowledge those types of steps and advancements if they are doing good stuff. The broader power structures are still rooted in colonial legacies, and they still remain largely intact. So, and I think while calling out Spain, right, because everybody who's been a part of this, the oppression and the cultural castration, spiritual castration of the Mexican people, Mesoamerican peoples, they all need to be held to accountability, right? I'm hoping that this is not a way for uh, the Mexican government to kind of deflect from the fact or responsibilities they have to correct the wrongs and the oppressions that they've committed. Also, it could be a possibility that by focusing on Spain, they're creating an enemy out of Spain, so to speak, or like making it about them. When how much are they really doing that to like certain agencies or certain aspects of their government, of their value system, of their political methodologies and ideologies, right? How much are they making remarks about divesting from certain harmful mentalities and frameworks? So basically, while it's crucial and it's good for Spain to acknowledge their crimes of the past, Mexico must also confront its own colonial legacy and the inequalities that still exist. Yeah, and that's my general thoughts on the situation. I don't know. What do you guys think? Again, I'm not completely savvy in detail about Mexican politics per se, but I do know manipulation and political PR shenanigans when I see them. And that's the impression I got, as well as again just trying to give more accurate insight into Indigenous issues. Again, trying to get beyond the bumper sticker, emotional based, ego based, pride, and think logically and keep our critical eyes open for issues that affect Indigenous identity and Indigenous community building, so that we can all better understand the nuances and cut through a lot of the potentially misleading narratives or misleading messaging. But yeah, that's it. Thanks again. Just a shorter video. Let me know what you guys think. Peace.